How did humans invent the alphabet? A system so powerful that everything you're reading right now still traces directly back to it. Think about what you're doing right now. You're looking at a series of small shapes on a screen, and your brain is instantly converting them into sounds, words, and meaning, almost without any effort. This feels completely natural to us today. But this system, turning simple symbols into spoken language, had to be invented from absolutely nothing. No one was born knowing how to read. So how did humans figure out how to trap language itself inside a series of marks? Let's start with the very first steps toward writing, because full alphabets didn't appear overnight. Around 5,000 years ago, in ancient Mesopotamia, a civilization called the Sumerians developed one of the earliest writing systems in human history, known as cuneiform. This wasn't an alphabet in the way we think of one today. Instead, Sumerian scribes pressed wedge-shaped marks into wet clay tablets using a reed stylus, creating hundreds of different symbols, each representing an entire word or concept rather than individual sounds. Learning to write this way required memorizing an enormous number of symbols, meaning literacy was limited almost entirely to highly trained scribes who spent years mastering the system. At roughly the same time, in ancient Egypt, a completely different but equally complex writing system was developing: hieroglyphics. Egyptian hieroglyphics combined multiple types of symbols together. Some represented entire words or ideas directly, similar to cuneiform. Others represented individual sounds, functioning almost like letters. This hybrid system allowed for incredibly detailed, precise writing, but it was also extremely complicated to learn, often taking Egyptian scribes years of dedicated training before they could read and write fluently. Here's the key problem with both of these early systems. Cuneiform and hieroglyphics both required memorizing hundreds, sometimes thousands, of individual symbols. This made literacy incredibly exclusive, limited almost entirely to religious officials, government scribes, and the wealthy elite who could afford years of specialized training. For most ordinary people throughout these ancient societies, reading and writing simply wasn't accessible at all. So how did we get from these complicated systems to something dramatically simpler? The breakthrough came from a group of ancient Semitic-speaking peoples living in the region we now call the Sinai Peninsula and the eastern Mediterranean coast, sometime around 3,800 years ago. These early innovators created something revolutionary. Instead of symbols representing entire words or ideas, they developed a much smaller set of symbols, each representing just one individual sound. This is now referred to as the Proto-Sinaitic script, widely considered one of the earliest true alphabetic writing systems in human history. This might sound like a small technical change, but it was genuinely revolutionary. Instead of memorizing thousands of complex symbols, someone using this new system only needed to learn a small handful, often somewhere between 20 and 30 distinct symbols, each representing a single consonant sound. Once you knew these symbols, you could theoretically combine them to write out any word in your spoken language, dramatically reducing the amount of time and training required to become literate. This early alphabetic concept was picked up and refined by the Phoenicians, a highly influential trading civilization based along the eastern Mediterranean coast, starting around 3,000 years ago. The Phoenicians developed a streamlined alphabet consisting of 22 distinct symbols, each representing a specific consonant sound. Because the Phoenicians were extensive traders, sailing throughout the Mediterranean region to conduct business with numerous different civilizations, their simplified alphabet spread rapidly along trade routes, influencing writing systems across an enormous geographic area. This is where things get genuinely fascinating, because the Phoenician alphabet became the direct ancestor of nearly every major alphabet still used around the world today. When the ancient Greeks adopted the Phoenician alphabet, they made a crucial modification. They added distinct symbols specifically representing vowel sounds, something the original Phoenician system didn't clearly include. This created a far more complete and flexible writing system, capable of precisely representing spoken language in a way earlier systems struggled to achieve. The Greek alphabet then went on to influence the Latin alphabet, developed by the ancient Romans, which eventually became the foundation for English and most Western European languages still used today. Meanwhile, completely different branches developed from the same Phoenician root. Hebrew and Arabic trace their origins back through this same ancient lineage, though they evolved along entirely separate paths, adapted to fit the unique sounds of their respective languages. It's genuinely remarkable to consider that the majority of alphabets used across the modern world, from English to Spanish to Russian to Hebrew to Arabic, can all be traced back through interconnected historical threads to this same relatively small group of ancient innovators who first had the revolutionary idea of representing individual sounds with simple, easily learnable symbols, rather than requiring thousands of complex, memorized images. Of course, not every writing system in human history followed this exact same path. In East Asia, Chinese writing developed almost entirely independently, evolving over thousands of years into a complex system where individual characters still represent entire words or concepts, rather than individual sounds. Closer in some ways to the earlier logographic systems used in ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt, but developed through a completely separate historical lineage, unconnected to the Phoenician alphabetic tradition. So why did alphabetic writing systems ultimately spread so widely and successfully across much of the world? The core advantage came down to simplicity and accessibility. A system requiring only 20 to 30 symbols was dramatically easier to teach, learn, and spread across different cultures and languages compared to systems requiring thousands of memorized symbols. This relative simplicity meant literacy could realistically extend far beyond a small elite class of specially trained scribes, eventually reaching much larger portions of society over the following centuries, even though widespread mass literacy still took thousands of additional years to fully develop. So the next time you read a text message, a street sign, or even the words in this very sentence, remember, every single letter you're looking at is the end result of an idea developed nearly 4,000 years ago, eventually giving billions of people around the world the ability to transform simple sounds into permanent, shareable, readable marks.